Welcome to Paranormal Pages. Let's get straight into the true scary stories. Story 1. The Lightning Watchers. It all began on a night much like any other, a night when the skies darkened with the promise of a storm. I've always loved thunderstorms, the way the heavens seem to release their pent-up anger and the electric anticipation in the air. But something about this storm was different. The wind howled with an eerie, mournful wail, and as the first crack of thunder shook my small, old house, I felt a chill creep down my spine. Sitting in my dimly lit living room, I felt the hairs on my neck prick up, as though sensing an unseen presence. The power flickered as the storm intensified. Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating the drenched world in blinding white. It was then that I first saw them, a crowd of shadowy figures standing just beyond the boundary of my property, their outlines barely discernible through the sheets of rain. My breath caught in my throat. There must have been a dozen of them, motionless and silent, their faces obscured by the night. The next instant, the lights flickered again, and they vanished as if they had never been there. I jumped to my feet, heart pounding. Rushing to the window, I peered out into the darkness, searching for any sign of the figures. But the yard was empty, save for the swaying trees and the occasional flash of lightning. My rational mind tried to reason it away. Perhaps it was a trick of the light, a play of shadows in the storm. Yet, deep down, I knew something was terribly wrong. For the next few minutes, I sat frozen, staring into the night, waiting for another flash. When it came, so did they. The lightning revealed them again, standing closer this time, just a few feet from the window. My heart raced, and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. Their presence felt tangible, suffocating. I could almost feel their gaze upon me, even though I couldn't see their eyes. As quickly as they appeared, they disappeared with the next flicker of the lights. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the coffee table. This wasn't just a coincidence. The storm, the figures, they were connected, but how? A memory from my childhood surfaced, a tale of restless spirits that appeared during thunderstorms, bound to the lightning that split the sky. The thought sent a shiver down my spine, and I realized I needed answers. I grabbed my phone and dialed my friend, Sarah, a local historian with a penchant for the supernatural. "Sarah, you need to come over. There's something happening here, something strange," I stammered, trying to keep my voice steady. She listened, concern evident in her voice as I described the figures and their eerie appearances. She promised to come over immediately, bringing with her old books and knowledge of the town's history. As I hung up, another flash of lightning illuminated the room, and I saw them again, closer than ever, almost pressed against the glass. My heart stopped. The lights flickered, and they were gone. But the sense of dread remained, palpable and oppressive. I knew they would be back, and with each strike of lightning, they would inch closer. I could feel it in my bones, a chilling certainty. As I waited for Sarah, the storm raged on, and the air thickened with an unspoken menace. I had to know who they were, and why they were here. But more than that, I had to survive the night. Hey! Subscribe for more true scary stories. Sarah arrived in record time, rain-soaked and breathless. She carried an old leather-bound book, its pages yellowed with age, and a determined look in her eyes. As she stepped into the house, the warmth and light offered a brief respite from the storm outside. "You weren't kidding," she said, shaking off the rain. "This storm feels wrong." We sat at the dining table, and I recounted the events in more detail, describing the shadowy figures that appeared with every flash of lightning. She listened intently, flipping through the book with practiced ease. "This town has a history," she began, her voice low. "A dark one. There are legends of spirits bound to thunderstorms, spirits of those who died tragically and whose souls can't move on. They appear when the storm is at its peak, drawn by the energy." She paused, looking up at me with concern. "If what you're seeing is real, these could be those spirits." A loud crash of thunder punctuated her words, making me jump. I glanced nervously at the window, half expecting to see the figures staring back at me. "But why here? Why now?" I asked, trying to understand the connection. Sarah sighed, turning the pages to a specific passage. There's a story about this very neighborhood, about a family that lived here a century ago. They disappeared during a storm much like this one, never to be seen again. Some say they were cursed, their spirits trapped in a perpetual storm, seeking vengeance. The air in the room seemed to thicken with the weight of her words. It made sense, in a twisted way. My house stood on the site of that family's old home. Could they be the ones haunting me? My thoughts were interrupted by another flash of lightning. The figures appeared again, closer than ever. I could see them more clearly now, gaunt faces, hollow eyes, their expressions twisted in anguish. My stomach churned, and a cold dread washed over me. Sarah gasped, her eyes widening. "They're getting closer," she whispered. "We need to do something before they get in." Her fingers trembled as she flipped through the book, searching for something, anything, that could help. I felt a creeping terror settle on my chest. What if we couldn't stop them? What if they were already inside, watching us, waiting? The thought sent a shiver down my spine, and I stood up, pacing the room. Suddenly, Sarah found what she was looking for. "Here," she said, pointing to an old ritual. "It's an exorcism of sorts, to banish spirits bound to a place. But it needs to be done during the storm's peak, when the spirits are most vulnerable." My heart sank. The storm was raging, but we had no idea when it would peak. The figures outside were becoming more frequent, more aggressive, and I could feel their presence growing stronger. We hurried to prepare, gathering candles and other items mentioned in the ritual. The tension was palpable, the air charged with anticipation. As Sarah began the incantation, I glanced nervously at the window. The figures were right up against the glass now, their hollow eyes boring into mine. A deep, resonant thunder shook the house, and the lights flickered ominously. My breath caught in my throat, and I knew we were running out of time. The storm was reaching its climax, and so were the spirits' attempts to break through. As Sarah's voice rose and fell in a rhythmic chant, the room seemed to vibrate with an otherworldly energy. The candles flickered violently, their flames dancing in the shifting air. I felt a strange pressure building, as if the very atmosphere was compressing around us. The shadows outside the window grew more defined, more corporeal, and their faces contorted with a silent scream. My heartbeat quickened, a frantic drumbeat in the suffocating stillness. The storm outside raged with an unholy fury. Thunder clashed overhead, and lightning carved through the sky, each bolt illuminating the spectral crowd gathered at my window. They were no longer just shadows, they were almost tangible, their translucent forms struggling to cross the threshold into my home. Sarah continued the ritual, her voice steady despite the growing tension. "We call upon the ancient forces," she intoned, "to sever the ties that bind these lost souls to this place. Let them find peace, and let this home be cleansed." Suddenly, the air grew cold, biting through my clothes. A chill that seemed to emanate from the spirits themselves seeped into the room. My breath came out in visible puffs, and I shivered uncontrollably. It felt like the room was caught between two worlds, and we were precariously balanced on the edge. The figures outside pressed closer, their faces inches from the glass, eyes hollow and desperate. I could almost hear them, faint whispers that mingled with the howling wind. Then, the lights flickered and went out. Darkness enveloped us, save for the dim glow of the candles. My heart lurched in my chest as I realized we were utterly vulnerable. Sarah's voice wavered for the first time, a note of panic creeping in. "We need to finish this," she urged, her voice a strained whisper. "They're getting stronger." Her eyes met mine, and I saw fear there, raw and unguarded. The realization struck me like a cold slap. We might not be able to stop this. I swallowed hard, feeling a cold sweat break out across my skin. The storm outside seemed to reach a fever pitch, the wind screaming and rain lashing against the house. The figures at the window began to pound on the glass, their silent screams becoming audible, a cacophony of sorrow and rage. The sound was unbearable, a symphony of despair that clawed at my sanity. I pressed my hands to my ears, but it did little to block out the noise. In the dim candlelight, Sarah continued the ritual, her voice rising in urgency. She spoke of breaking chains, of releasing spirits from their torment. The air grew heavier, and a low hum filled the room, resonating in my bones. I felt a pressure build in my head, as if something was trying to push its way into my thoughts. A sudden, sharp pain lanced through my skull, and I gasped, clutching my head. The figures outside seemed to sense our weakness, their pounding more insistent, their cries more frantic. With a final, desperate cry, Sarah completed the ritual. The room seemed to explode with light, a blinding flash that sent me stumbling back. The figures at the window recoiled, their forms distorting and twisting. For a moment, everything was chaos, a whirlwind of light, sound, and energy. I felt a force pull at me, like a riptide dragging me under. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The room fell silent, the storm outside subsiding to a dull roar. Breathless and shaken, I looked around. The figures were gone, vanished into the ether. The candles flickered, their flames steady once more. Sarah slumped in her chair, exhausted but relieved. But even as a sense of calm washed over me, a nagging doubt lingered. Had we truly banished the spirits, or merely postponed their return? As I looked out the window, the storm's final growls echoed in the distance, and a single, haunting thought struck me: what if we had only angered them? The air was thick with the aftermath of the ritual, the silence oppressive and unnatural. Sarah and I sat in the dim light, the flickering candles casting long shadows that seemed to dance with a life of their own. My mind was racing, trying to process everything that had just happened. The storm outside had quieted to a gentle rain, a stark contrast to the chaos that had raged only moments before. But the sense of unease lingered, like a dark cloud hanging over us. "Do you think it's over?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Sarah's eyes were fixed on the old book, her brow furrowed in concentration. I think so," she replied hesitantly. "The ritual should have severed their connection to this place. But I've never done this before. I can't be sure." Her uncertainty sent a chill down my spine. The thought of those spirits still lingering, still watching, was almost too much to bear. We sat in silence, the weight of the night's events pressing down on us. As the adrenaline wore off, exhaustion set in. My eyelids grew heavy, and I found myself nodding off. But just as I was about to succumb to sleep, a sharp crack of thunder jolted me awake. My heart raced as I realized that the storm had not passed, it was simply gathering strength. The wind picked up, rattling the windows, and the air grew colder, sharper. Sarah's head snapped up, her eyes wide with fear. "No," she muttered, shaking her head. "No, this can't be happening." She scrambled to her feet, frantically flipping through the book. "There has to be something we missed, some detail." Her voice trailed off as she found the page she was looking for. Her face paled, and she looked at me with a mixture of horror and realization. The ritual, it wasn't to banish them. It was to awaken them. A sickening dread washed over me. I stood up, my legs trembling. "What do you mean, awaken them?" I demanded, my voice rising in panic. Sarah's hands shook as she pointed to a passage in the book. The storm, the spirits, they were never bound to this place. "They were bound to me," she whispered, her voice breaking. I must be a descendant of that family." The ritual didn't sever their connection, it strengthened it. As her words sank in, the lights flickered ominously. A low, mournful wail echoed through the house, growing louder and more insistent. The temperature plummeted, and the air grew thick with a palpable, malevolent presence. My breath came out in ragged gasps as I realized what was happening. The spirits were not gone, they were here, inside the house. And they were angry. The room seemed to darken, shadows creeping along the walls like living creatures. I felt a cold hand brush against my cheek, and I recoiled in terror. Sarah was chanting frantically, her voice drowned out by the rising cacophony. The spirits' voices filled the room, a chorus of despair and rage. They swirled around us, their forms becoming more defined, more solid. They had awakened, and they were no longer bound by the storm. In the midst of the chaos, I heard a familiar voice, a soft, sorrowful whisper. I turned, my eyes wide with disbelief. It was my mother, or rather, her spirit. She reached out to me, her eyes filled with a deep sadness. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice echoing in my mind. "I tried to protect you, but it's too late." My heart ached with a sudden, overwhelming grief. The realization hit me like a wave. The spirits were not just any spirits, they were my ancestors, trapped in a cycle of torment, now awakened and seeking something from me. As the storm reached its climax, the spirits closed in, their intentions clear. They wanted to reclaim what was theirs, to bring me into their world. I felt a cold grip on my arm, pulling me towards the darkness. Panic surged through me, and I struggled to break free. But their hold was too strong. Sarah's chanting grew louder, more desperate, but it was drowned out by the spirit's cries. The last thing I saw before the darkness swallowed me was the pleading, sorrowful gaze of my mother's spirit, and then, everything went black. The storm continued to rage outside, a relentless reminder of the spirit's awakening. But inside the house, all was silent. The candles flickered out, leaving nothing but darkness and the faint echo of the spirit's voices, lost in the void. And as the final clap of thunder shook the foundations, it became clear that the cycle was complete. The spirits had claimed their prize, and the house was once again a place of eternal unrest. Hey! Subscribe for more true scary stories. Story 2. The Haunting Whisper. It all started with an innocent curiosity. I had always been drawn to antique shops, their dusty corners and hidden treasures calling to me like whispers from another era. On that fateful day, I wandered into a quaint little store nestled between towering buildings in the heart of the city. The shopkeeper, an elderly man with a knowing smile, greeted me warmly. "Looking for anything special?" he asked. Little did I know, what I found would change my life forever. As I meandered through the store, my eyes caught sight of a delicate necklace displayed under a glass dome. Its intricate design and the large emerald at its center mesmerized me. The shopkeeper noticed my interest and approached. "Ah, the Queen's necklace," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "A rare piece, once belonging to Queen Isabella. Legend has it, it's cursed." Despite his ominous words, I felt an inexplicable pull towards the necklace. I purchased it without hesitation, feeling a strange connection as I held it in my hands. That night, as I wore it for the first time, a chilling sensation washed over me. It was as if icy fingers were caressing my skin. I brushed it off as my imagination, attributing it to the power of suggestion from the shopkeeper's tale. The next few days passed uneventfully, but the necklace never left my neck. Then, one night, as I lay in bed, I heard it, a faint, whispering voice. "Obey me," it commanded, the words barely audible but undeniably real. I sat up, heart pounding, straining to hear more. The voice seemed to emanate from the necklace itself. I dismissed it as a dream and tried to sleep, but the unease lingered. The whispers grew louder with each passing night. "Bring me offerings," it urged. "Do as I say." The commands were insistent, echoing in my mind even during the day. I found myself drawn to dark, abandoned places, compelled to leave small trinkets and food. It was as if an invisible hand guided me, and no matter how much I resisted, the voice's pull was irresistible. One evening, as I stood before an old, crumbling mansion on the outskirts of town, the voice spoke again. "Enter," it demanded. My feet moved on their own, carrying me through the creaking door and into the dimly lit hallways. Shadows danced on the walls, and an eerie silence enveloped me. The voice grew stronger, guiding me deeper into the house. "Find my chamber," it whispered. I followed the voice through a labyrinth of corridors until I reached a grand, decaying bedroom. An ornate mirror hung on the wall, and as I stared into it, a ghostly figure appeared behind me. Queen Isabella herself, her eyes cold and malevolent. "You will serve me," she hissed, her voice echoing in my mind. "You have no choice." The next morning, I woke up in my own bed, drenched in sweat. My mind struggled to piece together the events of the previous night. Had I really encountered the ghost of Queen Isabella, or was it a vivid nightmare? The necklace around my neck felt heavier than ever, its presence a constant reminder of the dark encounter. I decided to return to the antique shop, hoping to find answers. The shopkeeper seemed to be expecting me. "Ah, you've returned," he said, his eyes narrowing as he took in my disheveled appearance. "The Queen's necklace is not for the faint of heart." I demanded to know more about the necklace, about the Queen, and about the curse. He sighed and motioned for me to sit. "Queen Isabella was known for her cruelty and dark practices," he began. "She dabbled in the occult and was feared by many. When she died, her spirit was bound to this necklace, doomed to command those who wore it." His words chilled me to the bone. "How do I break the curse?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. The shopkeeper shook his head. "No one knows for sure. Some say you must appease her spirit by fulfilling her commands, others believe you must destroy the necklace. But beware, destroying it may unleash her wrath upon you." The shopkeeper's warnings did little to quell my growing fear. That night, the voice returned, stronger and more insistent. "Bring me a child," it commanded, sending a wave of horror through me. I refused, clutching the necklace and begging for mercy. The voice grew angrier, its tone colder. "Disobey me, and you will suffer." Days turned into weeks, and my resistance began to crumble. The voice's demands became more sinister, and my willpower weakened. I found myself at the edge of town, near an old orphanage. The voice urged me forward, promising relief if I obeyed. Trembling, I approached the building, the children's laughter echoing through the halls. I couldn't do it. I ran, tears streaming down my face, the necklace burning against my skin. Exhausted and broken, I returned home, collapsing on the floor. "I can't do this," I whispered, the weight of the curse crushing my spirit. The voice laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the empty room. "You are mine," it taunted. "You cannot escape me." In a fit of desperation, I yanked the necklace off, throwing it across the room. But the relief was short-lived. The necklace slid back to me, as if drawn by an invisible force, wrapping itself around my neck with a cold, unyielding grip. With no other options, I sought help from a local historian who specialized in the occult. Dr. Alistair Graham was a man of many secrets, and he listened intently as I recounted my tale. "The spirit of Queen Isabella is powerful," he said, his voice tinged with concern. "She will not release you easily. We must find a way to sever the connection between her and the necklace." Together, we scoured ancient texts and conducted rituals, seeking a way to break the curse. One stormy night, Dr. Graham called me with a potential solution. "We must perform a ritual at the site of her burial," he explained. "Only then can we hope to free you from her grasp." With a glimmer of hope, I agreed, prepared to face whatever horrors awaited. As we made our way to the desolate graveyard, the voice's fury intensified, promising dire consequences for our defiance. The graveyard was a foreboding place, shrouded in mist and silence. Dr. Graham and I moved cautiously, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. The ancient tombstones, many cracked and weathered by time, seemed to whisper secrets of their own. We found Queen Isabella's grave at the far end, a grand, decrepit mausoleum with her name etched in elegant script. The voice inside my head grew frantic, screaming at me to leave. Dr. Graham began preparing the ritual, drawing intricate symbols on the ground and lighting black candles. The air grew colder, and the atmosphere thickened with an unnatural presence. "Stay close," he warned, his voice barely audible over the rising wind. As he chanted in a language I couldn't understand, the ground beneath us trembled. The mausoleum door creaked open, revealing a dark, yawning void. I felt an invisible force pulling me towards the opening. The voice was louder now, a cacophony of commands and threats. "You cannot defy me," it roared. My body moved against my will, drawn into the mausoleum. Dr. Graham grabbed my arm, his grip firm but trembling. "Resist her," he urged. "You must fight." Inside the mausoleum, the air was thick with the stench of decay. Ancient relics and bones littered the floor, remnants of forgotten rituals. At the center stood a grand sarcophagus, its lid adorned with the image of the queen. The necklace around my neck pulsed with an eerie green light, matching the glow from the emerald at its center. Dr. Graham continued chanting, his voice strong and unwavering. Suddenly, a cold hand grasped my shoulder. I turned to see the ghostly form of Queen Isabella, her eyes burning with anger. "You dare to defy me," she hissed, her voice echoing through the chamber. I could feel her power, a dark, oppressive force that threatened to consume me. "I will not be your puppet," I shouted, my voice shaking with fear and determination. Dr. Graham's chanting grew louder, and the symbols on the ground began to glow. Queen Isabella's grip tightened, her fury palpable. "You will pay for this," she snarled, her form flickering and fading. The necklace burned hotter, searing into my skin. With a final, desperate effort, I tore the necklace from my neck and threw it into the glowing symbols. A blinding light filled the mausoleum, and a piercing scream echoed through the night. Queen Isabella's form disintegrated, her power dissipating into the ether. The necklace shattered, its pieces scattering across the ground. I collapsed to my knees, the weight of the curse lifting from my shoulders. Dr. Graham helped me to my feet, his face pale but relieved. "It's over," he said, his voice a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. As we left the graveyard, a sense of calm washed over me. The whispers were gone, and for the first time in weeks, I felt free. But as we reached the edge of the graveyard, a chill ran down my spine. I turned back, my eyes catching a faint glow from the mausoleum. The broken pieces of the necklace had reassembled, the emerald glowing ominously. Dr. Graham and I exchanged worried glances. "We may have won this battle," he said quietly, "but the war is far from over." The days following the ritual were eerily quiet. I returned to my daily routines, cautiously optimistic that the curse had been lifted. However, a nagging sense of unease lingered. I couldn't shake the memory of the necklace reassembling itself. Dr. Graham warned me to stay vigilant, but I was desperate to believe the nightmare was over. It wasn't long before the whispers returned, fainter but more insidious. They crept into my dreams, turning them into grotesque visions of Queen Isabella's torments. I saw her torturing innocents, conducting dark rituals, and claiming souls for her own. Each night, I woke up screaming, drenched in sweat. The voice was weaker but still relentless, a haunting reminder that she was not gone. Desperate for help, I reached out to Dr. Graham again. We delved deeper into the history of Queen Isabella, uncovering more about her dark practices and the binding spell that connected her spirit to the necklace. "She was more powerful than we imagined," Dr. Graham explained, his face grim. "Her spirit is anchored to this world by more than just the necklace. We need to sever all ties to her dark magic." Our search led us to an ancient grimoire, a book of dark spells and rituals. In its pages, we found a ritual that promised to banish a spirit permanently. The ritual required a personal item of the spirit, the blood of the cursed, and a sacred relic to trap the spirit. The personal item was the necklace, but obtaining the blood of the cursed, my own blood, and the sacred relic would be more challenging. Dr. Graham and I prepared meticulously, gathering the necessary items and planning the ritual. The final step was the most dangerous. We had to perform the ritual at the site where Queen Isabella had conducted her darkest magic. This place was rumored to be deep in the forest, a hidden clearing where the Queen's malevolent energy still lingered. On the night of the ritual, we ventured into the forest, guided by the whispers that now seemed to lead us. The air grew colder, and the forest darker as we approached the clearing. The atmosphere was heavy with dread, the shadows seeming to move on their own. We reached the clearing, a circle of ancient stones surrounding a stone altar, blackened with age and use. Dr. Graham began the ritual, chanting the ancient incantations while I stood by, clutching the necklace and the grimoire. The air crackled with energy, and the ground trembled beneath our feet. As Dr. Graham reached the climax of the ritual, I stepped forward, placing the necklace and a few drops of my blood on the altar. The sacred relic, a silver cross blessed by a powerful cleric, was placed beside them. Suddenly, the whispers turned into a deafening roar. The ground split open, and a dark, swirling vortex emerged, pulling at everything around it. Queen Isabella's ghostly form appeared, her face twisted with rage. "You cannot banish me," she screamed, her voice echoing through the forest. "I will never be defeated." Dr. Graham continued chanting, his voice unwavering despite the chaos. I held onto the altar, my body shaking with fear and determination. The vortex grew stronger, pulling Queen Isabella towards it. She fought against it, her screams filling the night. "You are nothing without me," she hissed, her form beginning to disintegrate. "You will never be free." With a final, powerful incantation, Dr. Graham completed the ritual. The vortex engulfed Queen Isabella, her form shattering into a million pieces. The necklace exploded in a burst of light, the shards dissolving into the air. The vortex closed, the forest falling silent once more. Dr. Graham and I stood in the clearing, panting and exhausted. The night was eerily calm, the oppressive presence of the Queen finally gone. "It's over," Dr. Graham said, his voice barely a whisper. But as we made our way back through the forest, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching us, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to return. The end. Subscribe for more true scary stories. Thanks for watching.